Too.
Okay. Mr. President.
Senator from Montana.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the following amendments be considered as one amendment, number 5487. That's 5425 Daines, 5361 Ernst, 5360 Fisher, 5224 Portman, 5411 Langford, 5454 Murkowski. I further ask that there be 2 minutes of debate equally divided on each division prior to the vote.
Is there objection? Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, my amendment.
Senator is recognized.
Mr. President, my amendment would
suspend for 1 second. The clerk will report.
The senator from Montana, Mr. Daines, for Mr. Graham, for himself and others, proposes an amendment numbered 5487.
Senator from Montana is recognized.
Mr. President, my amendment would strike the anti-energy provisions that snuck into this bill behind closed doors. This partisan bill before us has a slew of provisions that raise royalty rates, fees, rents, and taxes that hurt our small oil and gas producers in America the most. And by the way, it's those smaller oil and gas producers that produce over 80% of our supply. I guarantee you, if there's a rebuttal, they'll talk about big oil. This is not big oil. 80% is from the small guys. These small producers don't have the ability to absorb the large increases from the government. And if you raise prices for energy producers, you raise energy prices for Americans. It's not that complicated. If you want lower gas prices, vote yes.
Mr. President.
The senator from Iowa is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. This one should be simple. My amendment eliminates subsidies for slave and child labor. The price of buying a car has reached a record high, and what is the Democrats' answer? A tax break for wealthy coastal elites to buy electric vehicles produced with slave and child labor. Currently, this bill already prevents vehicles containing any part sourced or assembled in foreign entities of concern, like China or Russia, from being eligible for the tax credit. And my amendment doesn't change that. My amendment simply ensures that our tax dollars don't subsidize EVs from any countries using child or slave labor. We all know the critical minerals that comprise EV batteries are largely mined in sub-Saharan Africa by companies abusing children, which are then assembled in Chinese-owned factories, many of which use slave labor. Subsidizing to the tune of $7,500 per person the purchase of a luxury vehicle for wealthy coastal elites that utilizes slave or child labor is a direct contradiction of our American values. We shouldn't be sacrificing on a clean conscience in exchange for a so-called cleaner car. I urge the adoption of the amendment.
Mr. President.
The senator from Nebraska is recognized.
Mr. President, my Democratic colleagues say wealthy Americans should pay their fair share, yet they want to expand the electric vehicle tax credit for the rich once again. In this bill, there are 2 separate EV tax credits, one for people who want to buy new $80,000 vehicles and one for those who want to buy used EVs. Why 2 separate credits? The tax credit for new EVs is available to the wealthy, while the credit for used EVs is limited to folks with lower incomes. Why do my colleagues on the other side keep giving bigger tax breaks to the rich donors? My change would at least prevent taxpayer dollars from subsidizing the wealthy. I yield.
Senator from Ohio is recognized.
So, Mr. President, this is a really easy one. Let's trade bureaucracy and more funding in this bill for bureaucracy at the Department of Homeland Security for desperately needed technology along the southern border to stop deadly fentanyl from coming in to our communities. Tragically, over 100,000 Americans were killed last year, which is a record from drug overdoses. Two-thirds of those overdoses were from these synthetic opioids like fentanyl. We know that the vast majority of that fentanyl originates with drug cartels in Mexico now, and there's a surge of these deadly drugs coming across our southern border. This amendment increases funding for Customs and Border Protection by $500 million for badly needed technology to detect fentanyl and other drugs. If you can believe it, right now only 2% of cars, 2%, and 14, 15, 16% maybe of commercial vehicles are being screened. Both GAO and the Department of Homeland Security, IG, have done reports saying we badly need this technology, and it's available. We need the funding. The funding is more than offset by reducing huge funding increases in this bill for this Office of Chief Readiness at Department of Homeland Security. So this money stays at DHS. Let's make it a higher priority to stop and detect these deadly poisons coming into our communities.
The senator from Oklahoma is recognized.
Mr. President, this is an amendment from Senator Barrasso and I. It's very straightforward. If you're a restaurant, you can deduct your business expenses. That's normal tax code. If you're a hardware store, you can deduct your business expenses. That's normal operation. Since 1913, intangible drilling costs have been the tax deductions for oil and gas. IDC's intangible drilling costs since 1913 have been set aside for preparing the space, doing all the labor costs, the services, the normal business operations for 100 years until now. Slipped into this bill yesterday, into the base tax, strips away the tax deductions for oil and gas companies, what has been in place for over 100 years. If you're a wind farm, you can use renewable energy credits to take your tax rate down to zero, because you can deduct your normal business expenses as well. If you're a coal company, you can use 45Q. But if you're oil and gas, your prices are going up. Americans should remember this bill when they fill up in the days ahead and when the people in their communities are trying to get a job with oil and gas.
The senator from Alaska is recognized.
Mr. President, the United States mineral security has really become our Achilles heel. It's a significant threat to our economy, to our competitiveness, to our security, and to our geopolitical leverage, all at the same time. We know that mineral demand is skyrocketing, and yet it's harder than ever to produce minerals here in this country. So what we've done, we've turned to imports to fill the gaps in our supply. So we are seeking through this amendment to put some limited assistance on the table to make sure that projects for the most critical minerals can move forward in a timely manner, and that's what my amendment does for cobalt and for nickel. Right now we import 76% of our cobalt, 48% of our nickel, but demand is growing so dramatically for both as a result of EVs, of energy storage systems, other clean technologies. So what we're seeking to do with this is repurpose $400 million for states to implement energy efficiency codes to instead ensure that domestic nickel and cobalt projects can advance. Thank you, Mr. President.
Who yields time in opposition? The senator from New Mexico.
Mr. President, these are all problematic amendments that will jeopardize the underlying legislation and the progress on climate, on prescription drugs, on a whole host of other things. So we should all vote no. We should pass this important bill, and we should be done with this.
The question is on the amendments. There is sufficient second? There is. The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Baldwin.
On this vote, the yeas are 50, the nays are 50, and the motion is not agreed to.
Mr. President,
Senator from Tennessee is recognized.
I have a motion